first lie I ever caught Mark in tasted like strawberries and carried the ghost of Chanel No. 5. It wasn't a scent that belonged to me. It belonged to someone else. It floated on his shirt collar like a whisper of something forbidden, clinging there long after she was gone. I leaned in for our usual evening kiss, the kind we'd exchanged 1,000 times, and that's when it hit me. Sweet, floral, unmistakable. Chloe's perfume. Chloe is my best friend. The woman who held my hand when my mother passed away. The woman who stood beside me when Mark and I said our vows. The godmother to a child we never had. Her scent lingered on my husband's shirt. And that invisible trace of her was enough to shake the quiet foundation of our 14-year marriage. Our marriage had always felt like a slow, sunny Sunday afternoon, steady, predictable, and safe. Mark was a good man, or at least I believed he was. He had that dependable sort of charm, the kind that looked good in family photos and office newsletters. His smile was confident, practiced, the kind of smile that could sell warmth in the dead of winter. We had built a picture-perfect life, a beautiful home, a shared calendar that kept our lives synchronized, dinner parties every other weekend, and laughter that filled every corner. From the outside, we looked flawless, but that one tiny scent, that phantom perfume, cracked the surface of everything we had built. Once you see the fracture, you can't pretend it isn't there. The doubts began quietly. A few unexplained late nights, phone calls taken in the other room. A casual mention of Chloe's yoga retreat that somehow aligned perfectly with Mark's conference. Every coincidence began to sound like a cover story whispered behind my back. And then, the truth revealed itself, not in words but in light. A text message lit up his phone while he was in the shower. I wasn't looking for it, but the universe has a way of forcing your hand when you need to know. The preview read, "Last night was incredible. Tell me you're thinking about me too. She has no idea, does she?" His reply followed almost instantly. "Not a clue. She trusts me completely." Those words felt like cold steel pressed against my heart. I'd given him everything, my faith, my love, my loyalty. And he had passed it off like a borrowed coat. My best friend and my husband, two people who knew me better than anyone else, conspiring in the shadows of my trust. I didn't cry at first. The pain was too sharp, too clean. I sat there numb, my reflection flickering across the dark phone screen. Then, slowly, anger began to burn through the fog. Not the kind that explodes, but the kind that smolders and plans. I didn't want a screaming match. I didn't want to break things or throw him out. I wanted something slower, something that would make them both feel the kind of quiet devastation they'd gifted me. And that's when John came to mind, Chloe's husband. John was nothing like Mark. He was solid, grounded, the kind of man who smelled of sawdust and sunlight, a landscape architect. His hands told stories of work, of patience, of things that grew from dirt and care. He spoke little, but when he did, his words carried weight. At neighborhood gatherings, he was always in the background, kind eyes, half smile, a man content with silence. I used to think of him as ordinary, but once the world you live in collapses, you start noticing the quiet strength in people you'd never really seen before. The first time I really saw him was at a neighborhood barbecue. Mark and Chloe were together near the grill, laughing over something private, standing a little too close. I stood off to the side watching, pretending not to notice, a glass of wine in hand that I barely tasted. That's when I found John, standing alone near the drinks table, quietly nursing a beer. "Congratulations on the park renovation project," I said, casually. His eyes lifted, surprised that I knew. "Oh, thanks. It's been keeping me busy. You deserve it," I told him. "You make the world look better. Even the way the light filters through the trees. It's like art." A blush crept up his neck. I realized he wasn't used to being seen like that, not even by his wife. From that moment, the seed was planted. A few days later, I texted him, an innocent excuse cloaked in green. "My ficus tree is dying. Any chance you could take a look at it?" He came by that Saturday. Mark was away for golf. Chloe was at the spa. John knelt by the struggling plant, running his fingers gently through the soil. "You're overwatering it," he said softly. You have to let it breathe. I tend to smother things with care, I replied, the double meaning hanging in the air. He looked up, his hazel eyes meeting mine, and for a second, everything went quiet. It wasn't attraction. It was understanding. Two lonely people recognizing the same ache. We started spending time together under the pretext of garden consultations. Coffee, long walks, shared silences. We didn't talk about them. Not at first. We talked about old movies, books, and the strange sadness of having a life that looks perfect on paper, but feels empty in reality. For the first time in months, someone listened to me, not out of obligation, not while glancing at a phone, but with genuine attention. It was intoxicating, that feeling of being heard. Our connection deepened gradually, like dusk turning to night. I told myself it was revenge. I told myself it was balance. But somewhere between laughter and late-night confessions, I realized I was lying. Not to Mark, but to myself. The line between retaliation and affection blurred. I began to crave his steadiness, the warmth of his presence. And then came the night everything changed. It was a rainy Tuesday in October. Mark called to say he'd be working late. 30 minutes later, a friend texted me a photo from a jazz bar downtown. Mark in the background, Chloe's hand on his arm. No anger this time. Just emptiness, the kind that swallows sound. Without thinking, I called John. My voice trembled as I lied. My sink's leaking. Could you come by? He didn't hesitate. When he arrived, rain dripping from his hair, he looked at me once and knew. "It's not the sink, is it?" he asked. I shook my head. He set the toolbox aside and opened his arms. I stepped into them. For the first time in a long time, I let myself break. He held me quietly while I cried, his hands steady on my back. No words, no promises, just presence. "She's with him tonight," I whispered. He tensed, then tightened his embrace. "I know," he said softly. "She told me she was at book club." That was the moment our loneliness finally collided. Two people bound by betrayal, finding comfort in the same wound. He lifted my chin, his eyes searching mine. Not hungry, but honest. The space between us pulsed with something fragile and human. He leaned forward and I met him halfway. The kiss wasn't wild. It was soft, trembling, and filled with all the things we hadn't said aloud. It was forgiveness. It was surrender. That night, the storm outside raged, but inside, the world felt still. We didn't rush. We didn't pretend. We simply existed. Two people who had finally stopped pretending everything was fine. When morning came, the guilt arrived with the sunlight. But so did something else, a quiet peace. The weeks that followed felt like stolen time. Every meeting, every smile was both a comfort and a sin. I told myself it couldn't last, and yet I couldn't stop. With John, I felt alive again, seen, wanted for who I was. Not for the version of me that fit a calendar. Then came the test. 2 pink lines. The world tilted. It wasn't Mark's. It couldn't be. I sat on the bathroom floor, staring at the test through blurred eyes. My mind spun through 1,000 what-ifs and none of them felt real. When I told John, we sat in silence in his truck, parked at a lonely overlook. I couldn't speak, so I handed him the test. He stared at it, then turned off the engine. His hands trembled. Finally, he reached over, took my hand and whispered, "Okay." Just that. No panic, no denial. Just quiet acceptance. We were tangled in something neither of us had planned, something fragile, frightening, and strangely beautiful. The truth revealed itself at a dinner party. 4 people pretending to be 4 friends. Mark at one end of the table, Chloe laughing too loudly beside him, John across from me. He caught my eye and smiled. Small, secret. My hand moved instinctively to my belly, Chloe noticed. Her eyes widened, flicked from my face to his, and I saw the realization bloom, slow and horrifying. "Sarah," she said, her tone sharp as glass. "You're glowing. Feeling all right?" Mark turned, confusion clouding his features. "Are you sick, honey?" I looked at them, all of them, and felt something inside me shift. No more pretending, no more lies. I've never felt better, I said, steady and clear. The silence that followed broke like a dam. Yelling, accusations, the truth laid bare like a wound. Mark shouting, Chloe crying, John standing and coming to my side, placing a hand on my shoulder. His silence spoke louder than words. 6 months later, the wreckage had settled. The divorce is finalized. The friendship's gone. Now I live in a small apartment painted white, filled with sunlight and the faint scent of baby powder. John is here most nights, his presence quiet and steady. We're not perfect. We're not healed, but we're trying. Sometimes guilt still visits like an old ghost. Other days, I watch John painting the nursery a soft yellow, humming under his breath, and I feel peace. Imperfect, hard-won peace. Last night, the baby kicked. Just once. A small flutter that felt like forgiveness. I placed John's hand on my belly, and when he felt it too, his eyes closed. The life growing inside me started from something broken, but it has become something new. A reminder that even from betrayal, something pure can grow. I no longer carry the scent of Chanel, so